Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about one of the big ones, the newest album from Lady Gaga, called Joanne. You know, I remember when it seemed like for a few brief years, Lady Gaga was the biggest person in pop culture. She might not have had the most hits or the most critical acclaim, but she sparked a lot of conversation by her very presence and how weird and crazy she was. Have to admit, I kind of miss that. Because here's the thing, she wasn't really all that crazy. Even with all the ridiculous rhetoric and outfits, she was at least trying though, and I liked that. And because I'm going to make a comparison that at first thought might not seem to make a lot of sense, but the more I thought about it, the more it worked. Lady Gaga reminds me a lot of Eric Church, the maverick country artist who has remained within the mainstream, but in recent years also built something of a reputation on being weird that's proven somewhat hit and miss. And again, at least to me, doesn't seem all that weird or strange for either of them. Because I get their type. I get what they're trying to think through here. Because they're music nerds. The type of people who study and examine music with an obsessive intensity that tends to alienate a lot of the mainstream. Both work insanely hard on their craft. Both want to be larger than life and worship icons like Springsteen and Madonna who can pull it off. Both are unafraid to cross and blend genres in ways that can be famously messy, but nearly always unique, and some of their best material damn near transcendent. And at their very worst, both made a lot of music that was self-referential to the point of disappearing up their own ass. Now, for Eric Church, that was his 2014 album, The Outsiders, but for as much as I do dislike that album, it wasn't all self-focused myth-making, and he alleviated a lot of the sting of that album by following it up with Mr. Misunderstood a year later, which turned out to be one of the best albums of 2015. Whereas Lady Gaga, on the other hand, she made art pop. And look, I don't hate art pop nearly as much as some people do. All of her work has been messy, with The Fame Monster being her most consistently strong and mostly enjoyable album, but there have always been some stunning songs and singles along the way. But art pop as a whole remains her weakest album, for in trying to commercialize the art aesthetic without bringing along the populism, or the avant-garde experimentation that could have given the album a lot more flair, it wound up trying to make more of a statement with attitude rather than content, and it didn't really get all the way there. Not helped by hooks and writing that were pretty far away from her best. And so art pop disappeared down the collective memory hole of a lot of pop fans. Lady Gaga went on to American Horror Story, that album of covers with Tony Bennett cheek to cheek, and wrote a song Till It Happens to You that really should have won her an Oscar, and now she's finally back with Joanne. And from what I had heard about the singles and writing of this album, I was getting the impression this could very well be her more personal Mr. Misunderstood, a tighter refocus on her core strengths, a tremendous performer and artist in her own right. And believe me, folks, I really want to love this. I didn't love Perfect Illusion or Million Reasons, but 2016 and mainstream pop has sucked so badly that I had hoped that Lady Gaga would pull something powerful and potent and evocative together. Did she? Well, folks, I really want to like this a lot more than I do. Because I get it. I get this album. I understand the unstable and self-referential balancing act that Joanne is trying to pull off. Another messy exercise in genre bending where Lady Gaga is both delving inwards into her past and lost loved ones and broken relationships, and along with it, her famously complicated approach to pop music itself. But this is yet another case where her intentions aren't matched by the execution, specifically in the music itself, holding back an album that could have very well been great, but just being mostly passable at the end of the day. A record that is personal and heartfelt in the content, but is held back from being better on a fundamental level on the musical layer, and believe me, that I didn't expect, and it's kind of disappointing. So before we get into that in detail, it's important to start off with the element that works the best here, and that's Lady Gaga herself. She's always been one hell of a performer, and main producer Mark Ronson is smart enough to give her raw but theatrical vocals all the room in the world to showcase one hell of a performance. She's emotive, she owns the stage consistently, and her stride delivery cuts through pretty much any filter set up to augment her presence. She really doesn't need them, but she doesn't make them sound bad either. Hell, she's really sounded better, even on moments that call back to her earlier work like Dancing in Circles, where she opts for her more restrained cooing delivery. Now, the one place where I feel that the vocal lines could have been expanded out a little bit more comes in the duet with Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine called Hey Girl, in that they've got really good interplay, but they don't really harmonize as much as you would hope. And sure, they're both powerhouse singers, so you don't really expect it, but on a song all about female camaraderie, both inside and outside pop music, you would think harmonization would be an automatic part of that arrangement. And that takes us immediately immediately to the big open question about this album, namely what the hell Lady Gaga was trying to say with it. And there are two ways you could really analyze this. You could play it all straight, or you could frame the conversation as Gaga's relationship with pop music itself, where the more I dug into songs like Perfect Illusion and AO and Diamond Heart and Million Reasons, it did seem to hold a fair bit of water. And yet any relationship she has with pop music as a genre seems pretty rocky indeed. Rejected, angry, mistrustful, perhaps even on its deathbed as she finds the increasingly hollow and slick direction all the more of an illusion, lacking the depth in which she hoped to either give the genre or find within it all along. That's one of the reasons why Million Reasons finally grew on me a fair bit more, and it's probably the best song here. Not just in searching for the one thing that she could use to stay in her dying relationship, but maybe within pop itself, that one reason that she wants to stay. Hell, that sense of disillusionment runs through all the writing on this album, as Lady Gaga doesn't shy away from admitting her own flaws on tracks like Sinner's Prayer, but still aspires to have that populism and unite people, from the borderline hippie iconography of Come to Mama to the really on-the-nose union across diva rivalries of Hey Girl, left all the more desperate when she then looks outside to the real world on Angel Down, inspired by the death of Trayvon Martin and the subsequent deaths of black youth, too often abandoned by police in the system, and she's demanding the leaders to do something to fix this. But here's where we get into some rather tricky territory. I'm not sure the implied double meanings of many of these songs works to her overall advantage, most because it adds layers of performance and stagecraft that don't really need to be there. Now this becomes a glaring issue in the production, we'll get to this, but even on a conceptual level with a lot of the writing, it can hurt songs that otherwise demand that sort of authenticity to connect on a deeper level. I wanted to really like John Wayne for trying for a ragged country rock-esque delivery, and Lady Gaga is owning that song, but note that she's not referencing country music in that song so much as country archetypes and symbols. And sure, when Kesha did this 4 years ago with Gold Trans Am, it was similar, but the wild sleaze there felt authentic and earned, whereas with Lady Gaga, it felt a little bit more like a pose, a little bit more artificial. It's one reason I don't think Josh Tillman's writing on Sinner's Prayer or Come to Mama translated all that well beyond just some melodic composition. Not only is it not as lush as the stuff he made under Father John Misty, but it's also just as plainly built on artifice, normally the sort that he would subvert with humor or acerbic earnestness, none of which Lady Gaga even tries, and I think that's a real misstep for her. But really, that's nitpicking around the edges. The real issues, they come in the production. I'll say it, if Lady Gaga wanted this material to feel less staged or have a little bit more rock muscle to it, she should not have hired Mark Ronson to handle the production here. Because while the bass melodies tend to come through well, there's some decent grooves, they're about the only melodies that consistently work across this album and are rarely mixed to the volume to adequately support Lady Gaga's tremendous vocals. And I don't get the logic of this. You get Josh Homme to throw real sizzling guitar tones across this album, but on songs like Diamond Heart to Perfect Illusion, he's stuck often pushing his tones through a thick muffling that rarely lets a full depth of texture and bite and tone roar through. Forget kneecapping a lot of your rock edge right out of the gate, you end up hurting a lot of the melody, driving a lot of your hooks beyond just the vocal line, and wind up with just another version of percussion being placed over melody, although minus all the reverb that would otherwise blend it all together. And then you throw in the saxophones that show up on AO and Come to Mama especially, and it feels all the more like what we're getting is a Broadway version of what this album could have been, sanitized and lacking more instrumental flavor beyond just the huge vocals. And what's all the more frustrating is that you can tell a lot of that instrumental texture is there, it's just not coming through. The surf rock guitar lick that opens up Sinner's Prayer is great on a compositional level. The stripped back acoustics on the title track and Million Reasons are both solid with some beautifully raw embellishments around the edges, but it's not blended into cohesive sound that could match or flatter Lady Gaga's voice. And since it's a Lady Gaga album, we get the instrumental tones that are just complete misfires for me, like the blaring synths on the outro of AO to the weedy guitar pickups and Middle Eastern scales on Dancing in Circles. It only barely works with the content about female masturbation, just sounds more ugly than it really should. To those ugly, oily elements on Hey Girl that seem to be trying for a Benny and the Jets composition, it doesn't flatter anything, especially not Florence or Lady Gaga. To the key change on Perfect Illusion that should have hit way more strongly than it did, especially given she was trying to go for that level of bombast. Look, as I said before, I really want to like this album a lot more than I do because Lady Gaga is doing a lot right here with this. Her vocals are as strong as they ever have been. Her writing on a technical level is probably better than it's ever been, and there's about as much thematic as cohesion as you would expect for this sort of pop album. But for as much tension as Lady Gaga has with pop music, you would think that her alternatives would have been better blended into the mix, or be better refined to at least the level of some of her contemporaries, instead of sounding like too many disparate fragments screaming to be yanked together. On a compositional level, at the bare bones of the melodies, this album can click for me. I definitely see certain songs like Diamond Heart, Million Reasons, Sinner's Prayer, or even John Wayne kind of growing on me, but beyond those, it's a very strong 6 out of 10 and only a recommendation for her diehard fans. Now, is it still better than most of mainstream pop in 2016? Absolutely. But sadly, that's more of an indictment on 2016's lack of quality than Lady Gaga's music herself. And while the ingredients, so many of them were here, it just didn't stick for me. Sorry. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so I can imagine this album is going to divide some people. I remember my last Lady Gaga review got a fair bit of commentary, so we'll see where you guys fall on this. I'm actually really curious to see where this one pans out for you, especially given, yeah, it's her most personal album. I just wish the instrumentation executed that better. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation? I'm all ears. My album backlog, I'm steadily working through it, so we'll open up requests pretty soon. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.